Housing is one of the most talked about needs in Knox County, and for good reason. Local leaders have been working to turn talk into action, offering incentives and launching new projects. But housing isn't just about where people live, it's also part of economic growth. And here to talk more about that connection is Chris Pfaff, the CEO of Knox County, Indiana Economic Development. Thank you for being here, Chris.
Good morning,
appreciate
Dave.
you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So first, just briefly describe what your office is and what its function is.
So Knox Economic Development, previously known as KCDC, is Knox County, Indiana Economic Development. The organization has been around since the early 80s, so we've been part of the community for a long time. And I always describe to people that there are three major focus areas that I think an economic development office should be involved in. The first and probably foremost is business retention and expansion. So basically working with our existing companies throughout the county to help them grow, knock down barriers to growth, help with workforce development and things like that. And then secondly is business attraction. So we're always promoting Knox County as a good place to do business and offer good job opportunities for our residents, for example. And this is very simplistic, and there's a lot of things that go into that. And then third is entrepreneurship. And of course, we partner and have an excellent partner in the Pantheon, and so we're fortunate to have them in place. But I serve on the board of the Pantheon as well, and our two organizations are very closely aligned because that's part of our mission is to help support entrepreneurship as well. But those are really the three big buckets I would describe as what our office does. But to the topic for today, what that has done over the last, if we were here 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't be talking about housing because housing was just something that the market took care of, and economic developers didn't necessarily get involved in that topic. But for a number of reasons, probably dating back to the, probably early 2000s, I'm guessing, that started shifting, and then with the recession of '08 and beyond, I think that had a negative impact on the amount of housing units being built. And then, of course, we came into the pandemic recently, and that just sort of exacerbated the problem. And so you'll find that myself and my counterparts are very concerned about housing, specifically because it has an impact on workforce development.
Right. And it's been a while back now, but there was a housing study done for Knox County. So kind of recap what that showed us.
Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. So we partnered in 2021, so it's been more than 4 years ago when this started. And so the hospital, the university, our office, the city and the county, and the Redevelopment Commission all came together to help pay for this study. And there were a number of things that came out of that. And some of them included the fact, and this isn't new news necessarily, but we've been losing population in Knox and in Vincennes for decades, really. At one time, Knox County boasted more than 44,000 residents. I think that was in the 1960s. So since then, and especially since the 1980s, our population has continued to go the wrong direction. And because of that, our core mission is to help improve the economy of Knox County, and that includes, things like, business investments, job opportunities, average wages for workers, things like that all have a positive impact. But population decline is probably the number one thing that has a negative effect on our local economy. And so it's really been, I think, it doesn't necessarily feel like this when it's so gradual, but it really is a crisis for the local economy. And if there's one thing that our office could do, it's to help solve that issue of population decline. Yeah. But some of the other things that came out of the study, in addition to that, included things like looking at commuting patterns. There are more than 3,000 workers that drive into Knox County every day for work. Half of them come from Illinois. And so one of the other things is that 90% of our housing stock was built prior to 1990, which means that only 10% is 30 years old or less. And when you think about the maintenance and the upkeep of whether it's an apartment building or a single family home, that leads to a lot of maintenance and a lot of renovation. I mean, you can imagine the kitchens and the bathrooms in these housing units that many of which may not have been replaced in the last 30 years. And so that has an impact on people's decision on where to live. And so we're talking about not just quantity, but quality as well. And I think everybody recognizes that we have a much older housing stock than a lot of the communities in our region. And then I would say probably the thing that I think surprised me the most is that in the year that we studied the number of demolitions versus the new housing permits, we were literally tearing down more homes than we had permits to build new. So not only were we not making progress in new housing, we were actually at a net deficit in the number of housing units in the community, which I think was pretty striking. And then I'll just finish by saying that the conclusion of the study was that if Knox County is going to grow and improve its population, the region needed to build over a 5-year period starting in 2020 through actually this year, we're already 4 years into it, at least 1,000 new single-family homes and 700 multifamily homes. And when we say multifamily, we really mean apartments, duplexes, things like that.
Yeah, and we've been tackling that here in the county. There's some developers stepping up to meet the need, and the Redevelopment Commission, Vincent's Redevelopment Commission has offered some incentives to get people to develop here. So talk about some of the developments that are happening right now.
Sure. I think the three that I would describe as having the most chance of getting built include Bierhaus Flats, which we broke ground on earlier this month, which is a 240-unit market rate apartment complex that's going to be built just across the street from where the Kohl's sits along Bierhaus Boulevard. And I think that'll go a long way to helping us attract new residents into Vincennes and Knox County. So there's Bierhaus Flats. There's a smaller project called Broadway Place, and that will include 13 duplex units and 2 single-family homes for a total of 28 new housing units. And then probably the most recent one that folks may have heard about is Firehouse Flats. So there's a developer out of Indianapolis called Anderson Partners that has an interest. They have a long record of historic preservation across the state, a number of projects in places like Evansville and Indianapolis and Crawfordsville, for example, and so they do a lot of great projects in addition to new construction, and so they're proposing to add as many as 98 new units right downtown. Wow. So I do think we have some bright spots. We're not keeping up nearly enough with what our study suggested we needed to have if we were going to grow the population, and there are a few more in the works, primarily single-family developments, neighborhoods in the county that are being planned. Those are a little early to talk about, but I would say if all of the projects that I'm aware of come about, we could potentially add more than 500 new housing units in the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years.
And you talked about how this relates to workforce development and a workforce. You and I have talked before, and the model now is, it used to be, build it and they will come.
Right.
But now we want people here so that they will build it. Is that
I mean, I do think there's a bit of a cart and a horse issue.
Right.
But if the pandemic, I think, taught us anything, it's that. And by the way, this is not unique to Knox County or Vincennes. Yeah. Everyone I speak to, and not only is housing a tight market, but industrial buildings is also very tight. The majority of the attraction projects that we see are looking for existing building space. So that's a whole nother issue. Yeah. But it's a similar. It's a similar challenge to housing, but I think the connection between workforce availability, which happens to be probably the number 1 or number 2 issue for any business. So think about all of our existing businesses that we have just over 3.3, 3.4 unemployment rate, which is truly full employment. I mean, you can't get much lower than that. And so I think folks should think about the fact that, you know, we've been living in a community whose pie has been shrinking, and we really need to have the attitude that it shouldn't stay the same. It needs to get bigger. So when we think about, when people say, oh, do we really need this, you know, this many new housing units? I would argue that we absolutely do, because if we don't, you can only shrink for so long before you become irrelevant. Companies, both existing companies and new companies looking at our community as a place to do business, workforce is the number one or number two issue. Energy happens to be becoming the number one issue, especially if you're a large energy user. But even still, we have got to address, and I think we are, but we've got to continue to put pressure on housing builds and those things, education, training. We happen to have a great partner in Vincennes University being in our backyard and being probably one of the most nimble and effective, you know, manufacturing training programs in the state that, you know, they can come in and tailor a program specifically to a company. So we have a lot of great things. We have a regional hospital that is fantastic. A lot of communities our size are very envious of the things that Vincennes and Knox County has. But I would argue that probably our number one challenge is continuing to put upward pressure on the number of housing units that we need.
Yeah. And we'll keep following that, and it's going to keep developing as the weeks and months and years go on. So we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. And keep up to date with the latest housing developments in the area by following Vincennes PBS News on air and online.